Hey everyone, Cadian Sword is still here today, and I want to talk to you about a 1,000 point tank list I wrote that is meant for match play, but could be slightly changed in order to meet for casual or narrative play, but I think you might have a lot of fun trying out. So today, we're going to go over my very first 1,000 point tank list as a way to introduce yourself to an all tank guard army that you could run. And just as a heads up, this is the unit in the middle. We go a lot bigger and we go a lot smaller as well. So, without any further ado, let's dive into it. What I have here in this 1,000 point all mechanized list, aside from the Tech Priest Enginseer, is a Tech Priest Enginseer. We have two Cyclops Demolition Vehicles. Now, let's take a moment to talk about this. This is the support, right? So the Enginseer is here to go with the Shadowsword, typically. Give it a 4-up invuln save and to heal any damage on it and keep that thing alive. The Cyclops are absolutely key in this. What they are going to do is if you're playing the Tyrannic War Mission deck or maybe Pariah Nexus and you have like engage on all fronts or behind enemy lines, these things are how you do that. Now, something to remember about Cyclops Demolition Vehicles, right? They don't have any OC. So they can't capture objectives. They don't have squadrons, so you can't give them take and hold order to give them OC. So they're never going to hold objectives. So all they're going to be able to do is to either screen or to jump into the backfield and try to score some points. Now, of course, you can do damage with them, but it's one-time use only, and then they're gone. So just keep that in mind. These are the 3 support units in this list. The 3 main units, though, that really comprise this mechanized list of 1,000 points is a tank commander, the Shadowsword, and the Rogal Dorn. Now, let me talk about the loadout on these real quick and then how I would recommend playing this list overall. So, on the tank commander, we have a battle cannon, but you could also go demolisher cannon. I have a las cannon on the hull and 2 heavy bolters and a heavy stubber. Now, the reason for this is I want this loadout to be able to reach out and touch something. We'll come back to that. The other thing is that there are no enhancements on this Warlord. So that's it. It's just one order because there's only one unit that can order. That's the Rogal Dorn. So we're not too worried about, giving any upgrades at this moment. Plus, there's not the points. Then we have the Shadowsword. Of course, we have the main cannon. We have heavy bolters, and what I would recommend is going with 4 sponsons with the las cannons, and I would go heavy bolters. The reason I would go heavy bolters is because that flat damage 2 and sustained hits 1 and twin linked will get you out of a lot of difficult situations, even if you're shooting into combat, because that means hitting on 5s and 6s, generating more hits because of sustained hits 1, re-rolling to wound, and you're going to get your lethal hits if you stayed still, and the flat 2 damage means you can kill Space Marines pretty effectively. And what's the most popular army in the game? Year after year? Space Marines. So you want to be able to handle those types of infantry. The flat 2 damage can also help you just plink off an extra few wounds here and there. So I just prefer heavy bolters. Hey, go twin heavy flamers if you want to. I'm just letting you know that my preference is heavy bolters. So the next thing we have is the Rogal Dorn. Now this one, surprisingly, I'm also going to go mostly anti-armor. So we're going to have the multi-meltas, the melta guns on the front hull. We're going to have the oppressor cannon with the auto cannon, but we're also still going to have the Gatling cannon and the heavy stubber. Now the reason being is so we can have a little bit of anti-infantry, right? 12 shots here on the Gatling cannon, 3 or 6 shots on the heavy stubber. Same with this heavy stubber over here. And that's going to give us the ability to take out some of that light infantry that gets in our way. But now let's talk about the overall kind of like how this list would function. What this is mostly kitted out to do is take out elites and armor, right? We got a battle cannon, we got an oppressor cannon, auto cannons, multi-meltas, heavy bolters, las cannons, and then don't forget the hunter killer missile on your Rogal Dorn as well. So we're mostly taking out elites, monsters, and vehicles. And that's fine, actually. take out all of your heavy lifters, and those are likely the things that can also take out your vehicles. So if you can pour enough firepower into your opponent's army early game and take out everything they have that could take you out, at that point, it's just cleaning up whatever is left. The other thing you're going to want to do is actually deploy back. You're not going to want to be aggressive in most matchups. Now, this is always matchup dependent. Please keep that in mind. I don't know what army you might be facing. You don't either, but when you do, that's when you should decide your overall strategy or your tactics that you want to employ to then supplement your strategy that you've chosen for your list. This one plays better all back, except for placing both Cyclopses into reserves. Now, the point of that, tell your opponent you're putting them into reserves so that you can bring them into their deployment zone turn 3, or somewhere on the board edges, say like where you get all 4 table quadrants on turn 2 or 3, right? You want your opponent to be nervous about trying to screen out these 2 tiny little models in a way that would guarantee you points or mobility. Now, this is once again assuming you're playing with the Tyrannic War, Pariah Nexus mission decks, right? And you're drawing your cards at random, so to say. If you're not, you could even do static objectives with this army. It actually wouldn't be too bad at that. So that's what you're assuming to do. And you want to, remember, really play this up. You want to make your opponent nervous so that they also deploy a little back, a little conservatively, and attempt to screen you out, maybe. If you can convince your opponent to do that, that's going to take the pressure off these 3 vehicles to be able to move into the midfield and begin annihilating everything they see. This is the type of list I would call point, click, delete. That is the point of this. You will drive up there and everything you touch should disappear. That's it. You also don't want to be touched, though. So if you're up against the melee army, you really want to get deep back into your deployment zone and try to avoid getting touched at all and take out your opponent the best you can kind of early game. If you're playing against any other army, maybe an all-comers list, heavy infantry or something, then you just want to also still avoid getting tagged in melee, but you want to get up there and then just annihilate all the elites and the anti-armor that they have and move forward on the objectives. Now, your Shadow Sword is going to have your best OC, followed by the Rogal Dorn, followed by the Tank Commander. So recognize that. You also don't want any of these 3 to get stuck in combat, so do your best to try to make sure that if you absolutely have to end up in combat, it's with something that can be taken out by like the heavy bolters, right? Because don't forget, if you do all 4 sponsons, that is 5 twin-linked heavy bolters, okay? That is 15 sustain hits 1 twin-linked heavy bolter shots. That's nothing to scoff at, right? That can do some serious damage, so it could free itself from combat. But you want to avoid it if you can at all costs. Because there's no infantry in this list. There's nothing to screen. You have to guarantee you take stuff out. Luckily, with the Gatling cannon here, even if you get tagged by a bunch of weak infantry against the Rogal Dorn, you could just annihilate them and take them out. So keep that in mind too with this one. So this one actually take out the Horde better. This one can take out the elites better. Your tank commander is going to be struggling a little bit more to deal with that kind of stuff. You could take triple heavy flamers on it, but once again, it's only 1 damage each. So even getting charged by a 10-man intercessor squad is really going to gum you up. You don't want that. So that's where I'm just like, well, I'm just going to take heavy bolters and las cannons and plan to stay back and shoot from afar. All except for the Rogal Dorn. This is the one that you should push up into the elites and vehicles of your opponent. Take advantage of those melta-gun shots. Get in there and absolutely annihilate your opponent. Then don't forget about Lone Operative on the Tech Priest. The only thing you want to be sure of here is that he can do one of 2 things. If you're up against a list that has deep strikers, right? Your opponent has deep striking units. You may want to actually use this to screen behind these units, right? Get that a few inches back behind the Shadow Sword and stuff, just so your opponent can't easily charge the Shadow Sword. Instead, they'll have to go to like the Tech Priest first. But you got to be careful about that. What you'd have to do is perfectly position this just within 3 inches to be able to use its ability. But then hopefully so when your opponent charges, they can't just consolidate into the Shadow Sword. Very tough to do. Very tough to do. Really is situational, depends on terrain and also where your opponent brings in their charging unit from and if they're impacted by that terrain and so forth. But you could try that. Most time it won't work because don't forget, in order to use your Tech Priest's ability, you got to be within 3 inches during the command phase, not the movement phase. So you already got to have it set up within 3 inches of your vehicle to be able to give it the buffs that the Tech Priest can deal out. So that here is my ridiculous version of the 1,000-point tank list for the Astra Militarum. I think this list would be a lot of fun. You might have a little trouble moving around the Shadow Sword on some terrain setups, but I think on an average game you will do just fine, and you will have a lot of fun with a list like this. So if you're thinking about getting into Guard and you just were like, well, I don't really want to paint a bunch of infantry and I just want to take some tanks, this is a list you could try out. See how you feel about it, and I would honestly recommend it. I think it would be a blast. Will your opponents have fun with it? Well, that remains to be seen. But I think most people would because they're going to be able to, like, if they take high infantry, they're going to be able to objective control you and be able to do some cheeky things to shut you down. So really, armored lists, yeah, they'll survive, but they're not as, like, daunting. They're not as much of a beast of burden in terms of conquering and winning your games as you might think. So that means you're also going to play really well with a low objective controlled list like this. So keep that in mind. I think you will actually be on the back foot while playing with only a few units and having a lot of fun. All right. That's all I have for today. I hope you've enjoyed this list review. I'll be doing another one here soon on all Leman Russes, so do check that one out if you are also interested in another variant of the all-tank list. As always, please leave your comments and suggestions down below, below the video description there. I'd love to hear from you all on what you think of a list like this. I think it's a lot of fun. There's definitely different ways you could do it too. I've seen one say you get rid of the 2 Cyclopses and get rid of the tank commander. You can take a Rogal Dorn instead. But I don't think it works out with the points with the Tech Priest. But it's something you could look at maybe instead of the Shadow Sword, you run something else instead, right? That's cheaper in points. Maybe a 3rd Rogal Dorn and a Scout Sentinel, perhaps. Could be a lot of fun. Maybe I should do that one in a list review. But anyways, right, there's a lot of different ways you could kind of kit this out to your own desires. Just remember, you do have to have a character. So that's why with this list, I went with a Tank Commander and a Tech Priest. And so the Tech Priest is your backup if you don't want to run the Tank Commander. So just keep that in mind. But please put your comments down below. I'd love to hear from you all. If you've been enjoying this content, please like and subscribe. I would love to have you coming back and watching some more stuff here on the channel, and just love hearing from you all. It's a wonderful community. I'm so glad to be giving back to it and be a part of it. Be glad to hear from you all. And if you want to support me, please check out the affiliate links below, as always, for your clear movement trays or for your painting supplies. And I would really appreciate that as well. But as always, have fun wargaming, and remember, Cadian stands.